Welcome to Bounce Back Stronger, the podcast that explores ways to find peace and purpose no matter what happens. Today's guest is Bob Butera, founder and program director of the Comprehensive Yoga Therapy Training at Yoga Life Institute. A little bit about Bob. Bob has dedicated his life to empowering others through the ancient wisdom of yoga. With a Ph.D. in yoga therapy and decades of experience, he has taught over 1,000 yoga teachers and 300 yoga therapists. His deep understanding of yoga philosophy and psychology informs his approach, guiding individuals toward greater harmony, balance, and well being in all aspects of their lives. He is the author of 5 books, including The Pure Heart of Yoga and Meditation for Your Life, and his latest work, The Yoga Life Applying Comprehensive Yoga Therapy to All Areas of Your Life, is focused on applying the philosophy and guiding principles of yoga into your daily routine. Bob, thank you so much for joining us on Bounce Back Stronger. As a former student and reader of your work, I'm so happy to have you on the podcast.
Thanks, Donna.
I understand you're in San Diego now.
Yes. Yep.
How is that?
Living out on the West Coast with a little bit of sunshine and a lot of yoga.
This is all
There's
good.
a lot of yoga people out here.
Yeah, it's nice to find your people.
Yes, yes. We were in Pennsylvania for the 30 years that you were mentioning. Our studio was probably the fourth, depending on how you calculate what a studio was in the entire area. So I opened a studio thinking I should be 45-minute drive from the other ones, not to infringe on their territory.
But there's also 2 other states, right? You got New Jersey and
Yeah.
Delaware in there too. So
And
you were
there
one
were
of the
no
biggest
studios.
studios. Yeah.
Yeah, in that area, we ended up becoming that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we published for roughly 20 years, we published a holistic magazine called Yoga Living that you know about, but it had a circulation of 65,000.
Wow.
And it went to everywhere that the Philadelphia region would cover. So it went into New Jersey and Delaware. And in that magazine, we put in articles, and then there would be advertisements from holistic practitioners that you would never be able to find anywhere else.
That's right.
And it was especially large in the years before the internet started to come available, where then you could Google things. So magazines like that are not as necessary now.
Right.
So we ended up stopping at around 2018 or 19. So we were able to unify a lot of people.
Yeah, and we miss that kind of. I think there's some holistic fairs now that I've been hearing about in different areas. So that's what's coming up as opposed to having those kind of journals. But it's something people miss. They definitely do.
In line with our topic today on yoga therapy, being involved in your community is a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Making sure you're getting out there. With COVID now, there's a lot of isolation going on. There's a lot of this. These are great for me speaking with you right now, but there's a lot of this in public, so people don't actually speak to each other. So our sense of even basic acquaintances has decreased, and from acquaintances come friends.
Mm-hmm.
Friends are an essential part of your psyche. If you don't have a feeder source for friendships, new ones won't be coming into your life. Your old friends are going to be there, which is wonderful, but you also benefit from meeting new folks. And that, I think, is something to consider. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw a stat yesterday that I want to say it's a larger percentage of this, but it might be about 20% of people don't ever see anybody face to face in their day.
And certainly when you work from home,
Mm-hmm.
you may see screen time, but those social interactions are definitely more valuable than we recognize.
I agree.
Right.
The Surgeon
Right.
General said that there was an epidemic of loneliness before the pandemic.
Yeah.
So it has only been
Right.
exacerbated,
Right.
since. So let's maybe hit the questions. Can you share why you pursued a career in yoga and what
Mhm.
caused that and really this focus on holistic wellness?
Sure. So as a college student, I was studying international relations. So I love living in foreign cultures and studying foreign languages. So I discovered that by going to Canada and living in Quebec. And I
Mm.
became close to fluent in French because I had studied it in high school, finished all my college credits for language, loved it so much. I switched schools and went overseas to Japan and Taiwan. And I did these study projects there. And then I was studying meditation there. One of my mentors sent me to learn yoga, and he sent me to India. And I was in between graduated college, but not really figured out what I wanted to do. So my first reason for all this was that meditation was getting me really in touch with who I was and spiritual practices and having those kind of discussions, that I wanted to spend a year or two just focused on that before making any life decisions. So I go to this place in India and it was a total click. And I can see why my mentor figured I would enjoy that place, because they covered every aspect of healthy living slash spiritual living in one place,
Mm.
from nutrition to meditation to yoga practices and physical stuff to psychological and so forth. But the way that it ended up becoming my career is that when I returned home, figuring, okay, I've kind of got myself somewhat figured out, it was clear that I was more of a natural teacher. And so I went to do a degree where I could be a teacher in private schools for spiritual studies or a minister. And because I was very interested in all the spirituality. And when I was there, I was teaching yoga to undergraduates, having been trained in India. And the classes kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And my professor said, you should be teaching yoga, not anything else.
Mm.
And she was seeing the benefits from people. And even I did some community classes. And this was in the 1990s, 1990 to 93. And this was before there were many yoga teachers around.
Right.
So this woman, Ann Miller, was pretty much this one, you should get a PhD in this, not just this master's in education, but you should go on and do a PhD in this yoga field. And she's the one who found my university in California, the California Institute of Integral Studies.
Yeah. And that's where you
So,
got your PhD too?
and that's where I got the PhD, and then it was focused in yoga therapy.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
what is yoga therapy for those who aren't familiar?
Yoga therapy is a term that was coined. We don't know exactly who coined it, but around the late 1980s, people started referring to yoga that was applied to health conditions. They started calling it yoga therapy. And the place where I was trained in India had been doing yoga for health conditions because their yoga school was one of the first yoga schools in a city in the world,
Mm.
literally,
Oh.
1917. Usually, if you studied yoga, you would have to go off to one of those retreat centers that you all may have heard of.
Mhm.
And you take that drive, and it's amazing up in the mountains somewhere, It's remote and it's hard to find. You get lost, but then you have a great time when you're there. So that's how yoga was originally taught. And then people started slowly in the early 1900s taking it to the cities. And then you have people with diseases who suddenly are improved, like their
Mm.
conditions improve. So the place where I was specialized in that. And so they called it yoga for total health. And then in the late 1980s, everybody started to call it yoga therapy. And their approach is a total lifestyle approach where you basically lower stress and improve natural living in order to strengthen a person's system.
And this really leads right into your current book, right?
Correct. So just
So you
for
can bring it
fun,
up.
in case
I
you
didn't
guys
mean to
didn't
do
want to.
that so easily, but it just happened.
No, I know. Even compared to my other titles, if we're going to discuss yoga therapy, this is literally our handbook. And everybody, Donna wanted me to share, like, so why did you write this book, basically? And the reason was to summarize pretty much all the different areas of your life that you would consider and evaluate. We sometimes use the image of a bucket with the different holes in it. Where are the holes in your life? What is stressing you out? Or like, what are you not maximizing? Like, are you not eating properly? So that becomes a leak in your bucket. And then we try to systematically do things and shift our approach to life so that we plug those holes and we become strong in all those areas.
In working with people, what do you find is the top 3 things that they struggle with?
So, top 3 things they struggle with. Well, we're going to end with deep breathing because almost nobody that
Does
I've ever
that?
met breathes deeply. And it's probably, I think I call it the biggest vitamin pill that you could have is your breath. That's your first vitamin pill, obviously, and your first meal because it's continuous. But probably, I think it's when we have a materialistic view to life is the main problem. So let me maybe I
Nope.
unpack that, and
I'm
that
in.
would be all right. That would be when we're disconnected from our deeper values.
Mhm.
Sometimes people like to criticize the modern day world, like, oh, the internet is disconnecting people, or social media is the problem. But it's not actually true. In the 1950s, people had other issues. In the 1920s, they had other issues. Whenever we're slightly out of balance, whatever the thing may be, that is the stress. So we can name the modern ones, which I just referred to. We were talking about community and the lack thereof, or social media really wreaking havoc on not just the nervous system by watching screens so much, but on the heart of people. Because as soon as something bad happens to us and everybody else shows their beautiful pictures, we start to feel a decrease in self esteem and we feel like we're the only ones suffering or something. So social media is a major problem. But top three would be defining yourself from spiritual principles, not from external forces.
Mhm.
That means that you could work where Donna works, you could work where I work, and it really doesn't matter. It only matters if you're in touch with your deeper values while you're there.
And when you have to cross those values, right? That's one of the problems when you're out of alignment with those values and you know something's wrong, but you can't really define it. So the materialism, we don't really want that. It's just something that we think we want, and it's out of alignment with what our true values are, but we don't know better.
The media, various things are always making shiny objects look like they're the source of happiness, and our source of happiness comes from our inner fulfillment.
Comes from inside. Yep.
You need to have your basic needs met. So you need to get a job and have a roof. But as I like to say, a hut is a roof, has a roof on it. You know what I mean?
That's a
And
roof.
there many people who live in huts are happier than people in the United States,
Hmm.
unfortunately, because
Hmm.
then we have to work so much in order to keep these roofs over our head, these very fancy roofs and fancy roads and cars and everything. I think when I talk about the values, because this is such a huge thing, it's not just that I need to work in a carbon neutral facility because I believe in carbon neutral, because it's impossible actually. If you drove your car, you're not carbon neutral anymore.
That's right.
And we can't escape the society as it's set up. I like to think of it more as not having perfect external circumstances, because I think that's where people who want to live this better life will often find a lot of frustration because they have to drive a car and they have to go to a grocery store and their food is in a package and they can't
Hmm.
grow all their own food, and there's all these things that limit us. But it's more in the understanding of your inner values and then resolving and accepting that they're not going to be perfect.
I think you also hit something really important too, is that the happiness comes from inside, not externally, and that
Right.
pursuit of trying to find it everywhere else is gonna leave you unhappy probably.
Yeah, right. Each person has to define that. And one of the things we'll do, and obviously I'm setting our yoga therapy conversation up, but we like to be non-dogmatic in this. So there is a spirituality to it that's it's in our question chart. That would be the essential starting place. And then as you build your lifestyle around this core center that you define, you can figure out how to express it in all the different areas of your life. So in the center of your pie is your core value that love is going to define you, or you want to cultivate compassion in your life, or whatever it is that brings you that sense of total peace and joy and success would be that type of quality. And then you would figure out, how can I cultivate that in my personal life? How can I
Mm.
do that in my fitness? And then we help a person, first is to define this, and only then do all the other areas start to line up.
Right, and you wouldn't do them all at once, right? You'd kind of address the one on fire first. Is that how you would think about it?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
because there's usually one that is on fire. So beyond meditation, which we're gonna talk about, what's 2 other things somebody could do to kind of quickly right themselves?
I like to say find a mentor. And yes, a yoga therapist is a mentor, but I don't have to be biased to think that only yoga therapists can help somebody. A good friend, somebody that's going to guide you without shaming you in any way, like by helping you determine what you want to do. They are going to be there to hold you accountable to say, hey, how is that diet change going? Or are you getting to bed on time? Because your sleep is crucial. And did you go to that yoga class or that fitness club, or did you take your hike? And are you actually doing it?
Yeah,
And you can have a good friend without even having it be formalized. So I would say some sort of mentor presence in that
it's a great
area.
idea. No, I love that.
Yeah.
That handles the connection piece too. We get so much in our head. It's really helpful to have somebody that you admire and is on the path that you wanna be on.
Yep.
Yep.
And yeah, absolutely. Like when I told you about my time in India, right? I said it was an institute. I lived there with a bunch of other people. So if you ever look at any of these places, there was always a community involved. If
Yeah.
you go to your religious place, whether you like a temple or a synagogue or you like a church, wherever you go, there's always like a study group for this, and then there's a social group for kids, and then there's a activities for this, and then they have their service once a week usually. They have a singing group. So the second thing I would say is even if you make out a list and you want to kind of address different things in your life and you get totally inspired by Donna here and like you're on it, you're ready to go, then I would like to refer back to what you said a few minutes ago. Just do one thing, like make that list, know it's there, but then just work on one thing at a time or else you'll feel overwhelmed.
Yeah.
That would be my
And
second thing, the mentor and then one thing. Yeah.
one thing, and then meditation so that you can have the space. It would be interesting to hear your view of writing a book on meditation and have been a teacher and a practicer of some time. So there's many people that's going to listen to this that do not believe think they cannot
Oh,
do
really?
meditation. Yeah, I think there's a lot of
Okay.
people that still
All
resist,
right.
and I would love to hear from you. What would you
It's,
tell them?
so I've given many talks on meditation, obviously. Like when you have a book, you go out and you give these seminars and you do these tours, which is really fun. You meet people and then you learn a lot in the process. And one of the things I realize is a lot of people are maybe intimidated by meditation or they've tried it, even if they didn't tell anybody. And when they closed their eyes and they kind of took away distractions, they realized there was like a freight train, a circus, like a concert, musical, like a whole bunch of to-do
Circus.
lists, worries. There's just like so much going on in there
Yeah.
that they were like, oh my God, I'm getting out of here. Like there's no way that I'm ever going to meditate. Instead of feeling bad about it, they just kind of got interested in the next thing and they went to play some music or they went out with their friends or something. So, first thing I like to say is think of the goal of meditation, not meditating.
Mhm.
And a lot of times people become obsessed with this. I need to sit here and I need to look like Buddha. And then, like a Bill Murray skit, I must become enlightened eventually. If you think, what's the real goal of the meditation? In these talks, I might make a few jokes about you don't really have to meditate. If you get to the goal, who cares? So, if the goal is feeling peaceful, is having clarity from all that chaos that can be in our minds, even though everybody looks like very calm, but if you ask them what's really going on, we all have different things that we're concerned about. So, what I like to do then is say, what is it that gives you peace of mind? That's actually one of the first things in the book. Even as a child, what were the things that you did that maybe your brother didn't do or your sister didn't do, but you loved? So, like, there's a kid who loves to fish,
Mhm.
or the kid who loves to play the music. Well, then, as an adult, go fishing and go play music, or I like to walk my dog. It was just the funnest thing, and my brother hated it, or my sister didn't like it, or whatever, but I did. Well, then you probably have a dog now, I bet, if you liked it as a child. So just take a longer walk, but this time don't listen to anything, just be silent. And then allow the peace to come in incrementally. And I always like to say that if my mind is here, what is it that's going to click for me? And be a little creative. Like some people, relaxation, listening to music. If you go towards drugs, which alcohol is a drug, then you know that if that's your source of relaxation, then any external substance like that, then you know it's not actually relaxation. So you want to do something where it's just you and either nature or some music, something that's going to be uplifting to your system. You can use substances in a certain manner, and some people can be constructive with them. But if it's on the regular basis, you're not going to be able to actually master your own mind. So that's why, again, when you're with that mentor, you can talk about things and it'll come up. Well, what makes you feel good? What centers you? Do more of that.
I like the idea that what you did as a child, I think, is really helpful because it was before society and work and all these things got in the way. What did you really like to do? There's this really touching Dove commercial where they say that what stops girls from doing sports is they're concerned about their body and how they look. I think it's a real thing. We do feel that way, and it's not just women, it's men too. And it's just interesting that if we go back and look at those things, what did we do before we
Mm,
got busy or too
right,
embarrassed or whatever it is? And there's probably a source of
right.
joy there and peace.
And I would say do those things. And then as you feel ready, sit
Mm,
quietly for 5 minutes.
mm,
Like then you can step yourself into it and see how that goes. Or like play your music, but do it in a manner that's quieter or aimed at peace. Even jogging. I
mhm,
think when I was younger, before I was introduced to something like meditation, I would go for a jog, which I would kind of say, well, it's going to help me with my team sport. But I would go out there oftentimes kind of late at night, almost like after dark, and I would run, and it would cause me to sweat it out a little bit.
yeah.
And there's a repetitive motion. So it's similar to hiking.
Yep.
You start to get into this repetitive motion, and your nervous system lets down.
Mhm,
So when you think of things like that, even going to the fitness club, some people find that to be really good. Swimming, some people get into kind of a trance when they go swimming. But again, it's similar to the running because you're not distracted by other things. You have to pay attention to your movements. So that's like a form of beginner's meditation. If it gives you beautiful results, and it often brings you back in touch with yourself, which is what we were talking about earlier. For those of you who want to go further, the meditation will often start to happen naturally then.
and then you can work on developing a meditation practice that will allow you to access it at any time, like standing in the grocery store or other
Yeah.
times, which is something we'll
Mhm.
get into maybe with the breathing. That's something that you could access anywhere, which is helpful. But before I do that, because I want to give you a chance, is there anything I missed? Because we kind of went around a bit, but I
Oh, no,
hope
I
I
think this is
appreciate
great,
you.
great. I
'Cause
would say, like, when I look at the book, when I'm sitting here opening this, when I look at the chapters, and when you talked about what's burning in your life, thinking about just doing meditation, if it's not going to address the burning issue, if you think about yourself as this beautiful organism, if you're thirsty, you want to drink water. If your mind's racing, maybe do some relaxation and take that quiet walk, or think about the psychological issue, or if something's up in your health, well, then start exercising and get yourself in better shape. Whatever it may be, you certainly want to start with that. And I would say that over time, what I see repeatedly is once you start to hit on 3 or 4 of these areas, say 3 or 4 months after some kind of constructive activity, you will have this quantum feeling of better health. Or even if somebody is in a really tough situation with a really bad diagnosis,
Mhm.
their internal peace will just move up. Because presently, if we think about our modern society, the table is kind of set up for us to be very stressed out. Everybody seems to be stressed, or now they say anxious a little bit. Every career, you just look at the people. So you really have to figure out a way to get around that and come up with a creative solution. So that would be kind of my main thing. Yeah, like to be creative, to figure out how you can stay in a nice way, stay afloat in your life. And again, I really think that if you lived in the 1970s with me and you were in high school, you would have had just as many challenges as you have today if you're in high school, just different challenges.
I was listening to somewhere on a podcast. They're like, in many centuries, you weren't sure you were going to live through the day.
Exactly,
You know,
exactly. And meanwhile, like there's a lion over there, or a
exactly.
bobcat.
I think that we really have to recognize that we're less accepting of the idea that this is life, that life is going to have issues and
Yes,
it's all in how we react and happiness is inside, which you already said, but it really is an inside job.
that's right.
And with
Yeah.
that,
So you want to do a little breathing because the two of us knew this was going to be at the end.
you go ahead. And then you're gonna do the three-part breath, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think, just maybe 2 seconds. I think this was one of the most transformative things in yoga training. I remember many times when people would do surveys, they'd say the breathing that we learned was the most important thing. And what I got known as when I was teaching was as the breathing lady, which is a testament to you. And I thought that was funny because I didn't do it that much. I only did it in the beginning of class. And it was really a way,
Mm,
any of my students that are listening, was a way for me to calm down because I have anxiety and I needed that time to settle myself. So it was really for me to start, but it was also for the students. So anyway, this is we're learning it from the
right.
person who taught me.
Yeah, and I'm learning it from the people that taught me. When you have these wisdom traditions, they're beautiful things to study. So I always like to say, yes, we're talking about yoga since that's the one that has touched us, but there are many traditions where we have things passed down, and the reason they're passed down is because they work really well.
Mhm.
So I've talked a lot in our conversation about getting in touch with yourself and so forth, and finding the inside and having like a kind of psychological understanding of how you work, and then getting in touch with your deepest values or your spirituality. And the reason I do that is because normally when you hear yoga, all you get is yoga poses.
Mhm.
And there's 2 popular definitions of yoga: the spiritual path, which I've been talking about with Donna here, and the go to a yoga class where I do poses and so forth. So I like to emphasize the inner one because we don't hear about it as much. However, the practices are equally powerful and helpful. You just want to learn certain basic ones that, again, tap you in quickly. So with breath work, has become very popular these days.
Mhm.
They give very sophisticated exercises, which are very good if you know what I'm about to show you now. You want to learn just how to open your lungs and also close them so that the air goes out. So the first thing I'll show us, if we'll take about 4 or 5 minutes here,
Mhm. That'd be
is
great.
just to exhale. And there's going to be 3 muscle groups as you do this. As you just pay attention to your exhale, you can squeeze the upper chest down and you'll feel that. Then the most elusive area is the rib cage area. If you put your hands on your side, you can exhale and try to feel the ribs collapse in. And this is the area that's used the least, and it's also taught the least, but it's the entire muscle group for breathing. And then after that, we would then think of this whole diaphragm as it collapses in. You think of your navel, it's easy image, and it goes back towards your spine. And see, if you can empty the lungs, the rest is easy. If you don't empty your lungs fully, you obviously are going to have a lot of air trapped in there, which is usually called dead air or just air that's not full of oxygen. And you can't then do your inhale. So we're going to do another exhale as you've been breathing here, squeezing in all these three muscle groups. And then we're just going to open, maybe keep the one hand down low, one hand higher, and you'll breathe into the lower hand. We're just going to do one or two, exhaling from the navel now. We're going to breathe in and out of the nose mostly because we're going to try for the calming breath. And then I'm going to have you put your hands on the sides and see as you exhale down. Now, as you breathe in, try to fill in the back where the thumb is. You have to be patient with this, and you'll start to feel like a balloon-like feeling from the sides here. And then obviously the next breath will fill the very top. So we're just doing what kind of gravity does, that, it exhales from the top, pulls the sides, pull the bottom, filling the bottom, the sides, and up. I'm just going to have you practice this a little bit, making that nice exhalation. Pay attention to any really neat thing that you're discovering about your breathing process. So we'll continue with a few breaths. I'd like you to make a smile on your face and just let that smile fill your whole body. You're telling your body that I love you, I care for you, and I'm going to learn something really cool, and take a deep breath. I'm going to do the exhalation. Notice anything interesting that you discovered about yourself. Even in a short practice, sometimes you'll feel like, I need to do more of that. So that's good. Or I really noticed something, like you said, and it feels a good way. So my final point for us is, if you start to do any meditation or deep breathing like that, obviously the deep breathing you can do driving to work, you can do in the grocery store line, like you were saying, you can do the deep breathing anywhere. And you may notice, if you pay attention to your breath, or if you've already been practicing some yoga, usually people start to notice certain situations where they're breathing in a very shallow way, and they immediately self-correct. And I'm going to guess, just like most people, your yoga students had that experience. And because you probably brought them back to their breath in class, maybe they were doing a harder pose, you show them how to breathe deeply while they're doing some core work or something. But as you get more experience with this, the curiosity and the excitement will start to drop, because it'll feel normal now to do a deep breath. And that's where then the motivation to connect to that inner point becomes your intention. And you want to always keep an intention in mind while doing any of these practices. So there you have a little snapshot view into the yoga therapy process.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so very much, Bob. I was going to jump in there when you were asking, what are you thinking? I'm thinking I need to do this more often. So, so I
Awesome.
appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for having me, Donna.
Thank you. That's all for today. If you want to learn more about Bob and his work, those links will be in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this episode was helpful. And if it was, please subscribe, drop a review, or share it with your friends and family. That's the best way to get it in the hands of those who may benefit. And if my daughters, Sienna and Sylvie, are listening, I just want you to know how proud I am of you, and I love you so much. Bye now.